On 24th February 2022, the Russian army started moving quickly toward Kiev, with Putin thinking that perhaps not many Russian soldiers would get hurt, maybe only a few hundred or even a few dozen. While Putin tries to present his attack on Ukraine as a defensive war, only those who are deeply influenced by propaganda truly believe that Russia is fighting for its survival. The government probably worries that if they reveal the real numbers, it could make the public very angry and potentially lead to protests. 18 months later, it's very obvious that Russia has suffered a lot in Ukraine. Even though the exact numbers might differ, credible sources say that tens of thousands of Russian soldiers have lost their lives in the conflict. Both Russia and Ukraine have their own reasons for not telling the exact number of soldiers who died. During active combat, there is often chaos and confusion, and soldiers may go missing, making it hard to account for everyone in the heat of battle. In a war zone, communication systems can be disrupted or compromised, which can make it difficult to relay information about casualties back to central command or headquarters. Sometimes military and political leaders may try to downplay the number of casualties to maintain morale or to control the narrative. In a conflict like Ukraine, there may be multiple parties involved, including various military units, militias, and foreign volunteers, and coordinating casualty figures from all these groups can be a logistical challenge. Journalists and international organizations may have limited access to conflict zones, making it hard for them to verify casualty figures independently. To make counting even more complicated, both sides have to deal with missing soldiers. This adds another layer of complexity to accurately documenting casualties in a war zone. For example, Ukraine has listed approximately 23,000 of its soldiers as missing. While some may indeed be alive and held as prisoners, others may have fled the battlefield and are now in hiding. Tragically, many may have perished in circumstances that make confirming their deaths impossible, such as when a missile strike levels a building or when a detachment is surrounded and killed out of sight of their comrades. While there are good reasons for not telling everyone about war deaths, sometimes there is also a dark side about not being transparent with the numbers of casualties. In Russia, even the media have strict rules on not sharing casualty numbers to public, which makes it really hard for the public to know how many Russian soldiers have been lost in Ukraine. And Russians went as far as putting people in trouble for posting tributes to their relatives who died in the war on social media. The Immortal Regiment event was also cancelled this year. This event usually takes place every May, where people walk through cities holding pictures of their relatives who fought in World War II. The event was cancelled due to safety reasons. However, the real reason seemed to be that the number of participants would have been much higher this year due to a significant number of soldiers dying in Ukraine. The relatives of those who died in Ukraine might have marched with pictures, and this would have revealed the true extent of the soldiers' deaths. How many casualties have been officially reported? So far, Moscow has maintained an official count of Russian soldiers' deaths, last updated in September 2022 by the Defense Ministry. At that time, they reported that nearly 6,000 Russian troops had been killed during more than 6 months of fighting. However, even back then, many people believed this number was significantly underestimated. Surprisingly, this count hasn't been updated since then, leaving us to wonder about the reasons behind this lack of updates. On the other hand, Ukraine claims that more than 250,000 Russian soldiers have suffered casualties in the war. Ukraine's figures encompass casualties, including soldiers who have been removed from the fight due to death, injury, capture, or going missing. Ukraine has a clear motive to exaggerate these numbers, to undermine the morale of the Russian side and persuade them to stop fighting. More reliable estimates might come from Ukraine's Western allies, such as the United States and the United Kingdom. These countries have access to reliable information sources and accurately predicted the invasion before it occurred. In early August, experts and analysts estimated that about 200,000 people had died in the war, with deaths roughly evenly divided between both sides. Before this estimate became public, American intelligence in the spring secretly informed some individuals that somewhere between 35,000 and 43,000 Russian soldiers had been killed. Similarly, the UK's Ministry of Defense in February estimated that between 40,000 and 60,000 people had died. However, despite the credibility of American and British intelligence sources, we cannot claim that these numbers are 100% accurate. Extra losses for the Russian side. Counting casualties in Russia is more challenging due to the involvement of paid mercenaries and other unofficial Russian troops. Even though these collaborators aren't officially recorded as Russian soldiers, their losses are still attributed to the Russian side. While Russian officials claim that around 5,000 troops were killed during the first 6 months of the conflict, totaling approximately 10,000 casualties throughout the entire conflict, the Wagner Group reported that more than 20,000 troops were killed during the Battle of Bakhmut alone. Furthermore, leaked information from the Russian Secret Service revealed that nearly 110,000 troops, including both official Russian soldiers and unofficial ones, were injured. This doesn't necessarily mean they all died, but it's still a significant number and indicates that many Russian soldiers were seriously injured. Experts assert that Russia is not merely losing some soldiers, it's actually sacrificing some of its most elite ones. The leader of a special group of Russian paratroopers reported that around 8,000 of his specially trained troops were injured. Among them, 5,000 paratroopers were wounded but then returned to the fight after receiving treatment, while another 3,500 were injured but remained determined to continue fighting. At the end of the day, both Russia and Ukraine have their reasons for veiling the true extent of their losses, leaving us to ponder the unsettling reality of missing soldiers and the challenges of accurate reporting on the battlefield. As we navigate this labyrinth of information, one thing becomes clear: the human cost of this conflict remains shrouded in uncertainty. While the official numbers from Moscow and Kiev clash, the truth may lie somewhere in the middle, as Western allies make their own estimates. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the complexities of the Ukraine conflict and the enigma of casualty numbers. Stay tuned for more enlightening content, and don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates.